No children?
All right. Well, we've got Wei here, and she just retired. What are we? 2 months? Are we 2 months in?
2 months.
And we have questions for her to see how retirement's going. And I would like to start, unless there's any objections to that. I have one question for you.
Hold on.
Okay,
I
go
think
ahead.
we just prep it first, right?
Prep.
She's not 65, right? She retired at
Can we say your age?
56.
50.
But you were 55 when you retired? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the year. was-
Okay.
I was
Well,
55.
that's good. So clearly early retirement.
Right.
And is it because you won a lottery or had some massive inheritance?
No, I wish.
Okay.
Unfortunately, no. I worked hard. We saved up and invested wisely, I hope. And we think that we're in a good spot to have enough funds that will last us until we're 95. If we're lucky to live that long.
What if you live to 96? Are you done?
Then I'll be broke.
All right. Well,
No, you won't.
Too senile to
I-
recognize what's
Yeah.
going on then. And
Anyway,
I have an additional question before I get to my one question here. What was your retirement age plan?
My retirement age plan was like everybody else's 65, get Medicare, and then live my life going forward, Social Security, that kind of thing.
when did it change?
When did it change? Maybe a few years ago when we started accumulating more rental properties, generating more passive income, making us realize that maybe, we don't have to wait that long.
So I'm not sure what she's talking about because the plan has never been 65, at least for me.
Yeah, we've been talking about this since we were not
Okay.
even
Yeah.
30.
But
is
they're
about what?
interviewing me
Yeah.
right now. It's all about me, not about you.
Thank you.
All right, so I'll start off with I know I originally supposed to be the first question, but we've asked like 5 questions already. So
Yeah.
let's forget about those. Here's my one question. Did you not like your job? Sorry, I'm getting old. I can't read so well anymore. What do you do with your free time? Do you sleep more and take naps? Do you exercise more? Are you bored? Are you cooking more? Are you happier?
Well,
Do you have more stress? Do you have too much time with Ray? That's my one question.
So, first question, did I like my job? I liked it well enough. It was stressful, but not too crazy. I worked for I was a contractor and I did IT work. So, there's always some times of stress when things go down. But for the most part, we work to make sure that our systems stay up, which, reduces the need to work overtime. And the people that I worked with were fantastic. I'm sorry to leave the team, but as far as the reason why I left work, it's not necessarily because I didn't like it. I don't remember the rest of the questions.
It was
now.
just one question.
Oh, that was my one answer.
No. What do you do in your free time?
What do I do in my free time? So I don't sleep in late. I know those were one of your questions. I do get up about normal time, 8, and as I would have started work. 2 times a week, I now volunteer at the local food pantry, so I help out there. Makes me feel good and happy to help. And I play pickleball. I do some work as far as our rental properties, managing them, answering a lot of inquiries. We're starting to pick up a lot of inquiries for summer reservations and things like that. So I'm still doing that, trying to work on my children's book. And
Ooh, let's back up. I didn't know you were writing a children's book.
She's not writing it, she's reading it.
yeah, I can't get past some of those big words. So there's a lot that we had on our list that we put on the back burner because we didn't have time. But now that I have more time, we're picking up some of those little odd projects.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're
I don't
still
want
on-
to hog all
You're
of the
still on
questions.
your first question.
Yes, this is still my first question, and we're on part C. Are you finding that you have a lot more or less time than you thought you would have? Is a day going by quickly?
Absolutely. I thought I would be bored perhaps.
That was my
have
question. Are you bored?
Hours of days that I don't have anything to do, and that is, far from the truth. My day is full. Ray will look at my calendar, and
So
I'm.
let me interject real quick because these are like the after effect, right? But if I was listening to this interview, I would want to first hear what was the foundation you placed
Good
in
question.
order to achieve what you've achieved? Because we're sort of dealing with what am I doing now that I did it? I want to know more, or we should lay the foundation for the people hearing. How did you accomplish it? Meaning, when you saw that it was able, what are the financial steps that you did? So, meaning you keep alluding to you have passive income. What is it? How did you achieve it?
Well, that's a really long story. I mean,
To me, that's the basis
I
of
mean,
the retirement. Or
I,
else-
I want to say the basis of everything was when I was younger and when I was working, I saved as much as I could, right? And that's how it all started. I didn't buy fancy clothes, do my hair, my nails. I drove old cars and saved wherever you can.
So that's a good way to pile up a nest egg. But let me rephrase the question. How do you know when the nest egg is large enough? Is it based on some dollar amount, or is it based on the work that nest egg is doing for you? In other words, is the passive income at a certain level that, hey, now it replaces the day job salary? What was the criteria that enabled you to say, okay, I can do this?
Well, that's definitely Ray's spreadsheet and probably one of your spreadsheets. Everybody, how much is enough, right? Nobody knows that answer, but you probably just have to, simple as doing the math.
I think we realized multiple times when me and Ray have talked about this. Whenever you said a number and you hit it, you're like, well, it can't be right. Someone must be higher. So you just raise it and you just keep raising it.
Right.
No, but I think it's important what you're saying, right? So you're
Mm-hmm.
still saying or alluding to what you did, but like say it like so. We have
Right.
uh,
So yeah,
X property,
we're recording all our assets, right?
right? So
Whether
you
it's
have
homes, rental properties, 401ks, which are retirement incomes. Retirement plans. We have, savings, investment accounts.
Johnny wants details.
no, and I don't want to.
You want
Be
numbers?
nosy. All I'm saying is like if I was 25 years old, right? And I have this inkling in my head, and now I see an example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think the biggest thing with this retirement early is that you have very little examples. So you guys know one person, right?
We know one, yeah.
I know zero. And the ones that I know, and this is horrible to say, I always have a joke that I go to Puerto Rico and no one works. That doesn't mean they're well off in any way. They're just living either off the government or they're living on such a menial number, but they're happy. That's different.
Right.
But to meet someone in the United States who was working, a professional, being able to do it, I'm looking at like someone, an Allison or whoever, be like, okay, so instead of
right.
doing this, okay, yes, you
Right,
drove
right.
old cars,
Mm-hmm.
but with that money that you saved,
Right.
you bought a rental property. This rental property makes X amount of percentage. I think that it's important for people
Right,
to
right.
understand that initial sacrifice gave you a nest egg. And with that nest egg,
Right.
you did X.
Right.
And I think if you could elaborate
Okay.
on that, it's like giving real world examples. I think
Mm-hmm.
the real world example that a retirement early can actually happen, that's awesome.
Right. Right.
But you need to then drill down to say, all right, this is how we did it.
Okay. I mean, yes. So we started, obviously working, corporation companies provide you with 401ks. We max out our, contributions to 401k. If the company's going to match, you put in at least what the company's going to match, free money, right? So wherever you can get free money is that somebody's going to give you 'cause
Take it.
to do something, do it, right? Unless you're absolutely, living paycheck to paycheck. So that, like you said, you start building your nest egg, have enough savings for rainy days, emergencies. What is the standard? 3 months, 6 months rent, whatever that may be. And, that's liquid. We started, and diversification, right? You want, HSA if you can do, you have 401ks, you got IRAs, savings plan, invest in stocks. We did some of that. Learn some hard facts about investing in the market during the bubble and
dot-com.
dot-com crash.
Yeah.
So
And then we started, looking into investment properties that we could rent out. And so when we had enough money that we could actually purchase a rental property, we did calculations to make sure that, purchase price, mortgage, expenses, taxes, all that on that property is covered by whatever rental income is potentially there. So you got to do your homework. You can't just, plow ahead and buy this stock.
I think it's
and
also
that
important
stock.
to mention you guys didn't use what do you call it, the company? You didn't have a company who handled your
Property
rental properties,
management.
your property management,
Correct.
and you saved you what 20%?
Mm-hmm.
30%.
Yeah. So it's not like you just got a property and took the money, and you guys put a little more work into it to get more money.
But I think it's important. Obviously, somehow we have to give the information that if you did want a property management and you're willing to take the hit,
Right.
it's almost
Right.
it's an exercise in just moving money from one to the other.
Yeah.
But there is the potential to save, but it's definitely not something that's necessary.
Right. Save and really, like, you got to do your homework. You can't just say, "Oh, that house is for sale. I'm just going to buy and rent it." Well, you have to, analyze, is it rentable? How much can you rent it for? What, is it long-term, short-term? Obviously, short-term rentals are more profitable, just things like that. Knowing what your mortgage is going to be, taxes, expenses, things like that. You can't, and the location obviously, plays a part into rental. You can buy a house in, I don't know, say Union, and or do you buy a property that somebody's going to rent year round? So you got to do your homework and do the math.
So at the end, you guys, in order to accomplish this passive income that could replace your job, you have how many properties?
Right now we have 6 rental properties.
So 6 rental properties.
Mhm.
So you alluded to something that, especially during COVID and a lot of different scenarios where they manipulated the market, in the time frame where you said, all right, there's going to be 401ks, there's going to be stocks, there's going to be real estate, but you paused on the stock. You said you learned a lot. What do you think is something that you could compare the return on investment on stocks and the return on investment on real estate?
So real estate is less emotional, I want to say. Like stocks, unfortunately, at least for me, there's a bit of emotion comes into play, right? Where it goes up a certain amount, and it's always the guessing game of when's the right time to get out, when's the right time to sell, is it going to crash tomorrow, is it going to,
Is
keep
that
going
because
up?
it's so easy to get in and out of stocks, whereas you could be doing it minute to minute or second to second, whereas with real estate it's
Right.
on a scale of weeks and months,
Mhm.
and that you
Right.
do have to think more.
Yes. Yeah, you have that, and it's less emotional, right?
So Gary had brought up a good point earlier regarding the property management companies, and bypassing that is giving you a larger, as we're calling it right now, passive income. But it seems, my understanding, because you're choosing to manage the properties and have a higher, what we're calling passive income, truly isn't passive. Which is not saying that it's good or bad, but so our viewers and listeners, can get a good appreciation and understanding of it. In a previous episode of the podcast, Gary had shared how he really didn't enjoy being a landlord. And Johnny had mentioned about, well, if you have a 401k, it's kind of a no-brainer because you don't get to call in the middle of the night for the kitchen sink that's overflowing. So to give the understanding correct for our viewers, it seems that although you're retired from a job, you're choosing to do property management. And like you said, your days are still filled, with different things as you choose with your flexibility.
Right.
So would you say that the quote unquote passive income isn't necessarily passive, but it gives you much more flexibility in the day to do more things and opens up your schedule?
Yeah.
What
No,
level of
def-
management do you do?
So you're right. It's not necessarily passive. There is work. When something breaks, you got to be ready to address it. Where we are fortunate enough that we have reliable people that we can call that can respond quicker than we can.
So you're not the one going out there with a wrench and plumber's butt crack to fix
Correct,
something. You're
correct, you
picking up
know.
the phone and saying, "Hey, here's the
Sometimes-
address,
sometimes-
credit card
They
data."
have.
Sometimes
Yeah,
if we
have.
can, if it's
Yeah.
a minor thing, something that can wait.
I mean,
Nothing
We've had a
that
lot of
can wait.
weekends where we
To-
go up there for the weekend, and next thing I know, we're just fixing
but
things.
Right.
to give a backdrop, Ray and I showed up to the house one time and we heard a funny noise.
Funny noise.
And we're like, I'm like, Ray, there's something
On
running
so-
water
yeah.
in that.
Oh.
And he's like, no. I'm like, yeah, and it's in this room. Goes and gets the key, opens up the utility room. And the safety on the hot water heater had popped and was piped into the crawl space or whatever you would call that. It's more like
Like a basement.
It's like a basement, but enclosed. And literally, what time was that at night?
10 p.m.
Yeah.
20 degrees outside.
We are now looking at a pool literally in his crawl space. And we're like, holy smoke. So there's not too many people you'd call for stuff like that, but it's important to know that
Right.
that happens.
It,
Right.
ha- it happened.
And they're willing to
Right.
to respond.
Right.
But the only reason why I brought it up, and obviously you angled it in a different way when you asked about it. But they also have an example of a property where they do leave it completely up to the, I guess you could say,
Property management,
proprietor,
yeah.
whoever owns that building, and they also do the property management. But it's a big chunk, but because it's so lucrative, you don't mind.
Yep.
But I think you should elaborate on that, because one of the things that I'm, at least myself, looking for in my plan, I'm willing to put in the time now. But the minute I say I'm retired, I want to be able to also say, I'm not touching that.
Truly
That's
passive.
just saying, truly passive. But because if people think that you always have to be interactive,
Right.
they might go that route. But it's good to have an example, if you guys could share it, the way you do the Myrtle Beach
Yeah.
property.
So that's interesting, right? So we have property in the Poconos, Pennsylvania, and then we have property in Myrtle Beach and property in Florida. And the experiences for all three are completely different, right? So Poconos probably a little bit more hands-on. You know, we've got change of seasons. We have to worry about ice, snow removal, and then
And the typical rental period in the Poconos is how long?
most of the summers, and then weekends through the winter.
No, but how long does each tenant stay? On
Uh,
average?
Weekends are most of the majority of the rentals throughout the year, and then during the summer weeks we only do weekly. So, so there, you know, there's definitely a bit more wear and tear because you have people coming in every weekend, in and out. You know, different people. So it's so definitely a little bit more work. I think, you know, if we want to use that word, involved for those properties. Like Johnny mentioned, the Dunes Village one is completely hands off. It's a condo that's part of, you know, it's like a hotel, but every unit in the hotel is individually owned. They have on-site property management that takes care of everything for you, including maintenance, checking people in and out, making reservations for you. And they take a big cut, but as Johnny mentioned, it's, you know, the income is lucrative enough that it's still worth it. The other property management that we do is in Florida. That's a little different animal. It's in a 55 plus community. Most of the renters are their monthly rentals, and they're, you know, older people that are there, and, you know, they take care of your home. There's really no issues there. So there's a little less work. So, I mean, every location is going to be different. Like I said, do your homework, you know, and figure out how much work or no work do you want to do. Obviously, you know, the less work you're willing to put in, the more you're going to pay out, and it's going to come out of your profits, right? So
And what does do your homework mean? Specifically, what are you actually doing?
like I mentioned before, right? Making sure it's a viable rental, that you're going to be able to rent it enough that will cover your expenses.
How do you do that? How do you know something's going to rent for $200 a day or $200
Well,
a month.
I mean, nowadays you can go on Airbnb and see if there are any rentals in the area, right? You can see what they're renting for. Obviously, look for like properties. And, if you're buying a 2-bedroom condo, don't compare it to a 5-bedroom, unit and say, oh, I'm going to get that kind of rent.
Taxes are another big expense. Is that all available online as well?
That should absolutely be available. All that information is available.
How about,
And
how do you know
tax
how to,
records? You can, search county tax records to find out what taxes are.
and how do you know how much to budget for ongoing repairs?
We I think we do 5% or something like that.
3.
Of 3%.
Well, whatever Adam's spreadsheet says. 'Cause we're still using
Come
his
on,
spreadsheet.
I'm asking the
So-
questions. I'm not supposed to know the answers.
Adam's
So wait, not to close that chapter, but just to give an example of percentage. So you guys do the property management in the Poconos. They do it in Myrtle Beach. What's the percentage difference?
percentage difference between.
So if you were to compare the two, right?
Return on investment.
Return on investment, which one is better?
um
You don't have to say
Yeah,
it in
yeah.
percentage. You don't have
Yeah.
to say it in numbers.
But you're saving about 20%, right? Or is it more?
like if we were to hire a property management company, they would take 20% of your rent.
No, but I don't want the
But-
percentage when it comes
so-
to like how he's asking. I'm
You're saying
saying if
return.
you did it, right? If you took the whole investment, say, all right, I'm making X percentage on this one, X percentage on that one. Are you making more on the Myrtle Beach one compared to the one in the Poconos?
I'm going to rescue her and say
Yes.
that we don't know because I haven't done enough
don't know.
math to look at what that is.
I mean, I know what we're getting in Myrtle Beach. I just don't know what the percentage is in.
Yeah, to compare them
In the
all,
Poconos.
I don't
But
have the numbers.
do you understand why I'm
Haven't
asking
done
the
the math.
question, right? Because to me, if you could sacrifice more, I mean, obviously,
Mhm.
if we had the whole, I don't know, what would you call it, the associated information on the YouTube or wherever it's going to show up, you would want to be able to explain to people what are the nuances of having one of those type properties. One,
Yeah.
you can't get a normal mortgage, but let's say that you were able to explain that and say, this is the sacrifice for that one investment. This is the sacrifice for that investment. Because a lot of the things that I'm noticing, and the reason why I keep going back to that, getting someone to manage it, and I don't want to say it the wrong way, but when I talk to all these young kids at 22, 25, majority of them have no clue how to turn a wrench, how to do a pipe, how to do whatever. So at one way or another,
I can't either.
I'm right with you.
Look,
Gary.
but it's a good example, right? So for instance,
Absolutely.
if I'm doing the math, I would say, all right, so if I just wait 5 more years, and now I'm qualifying for this particular one because I have to save this much more money, I think we need to start getting to the specifics of that, right?
Well, look, apples to apples, the more work you're willing to put in, the bigger your return's going to be. It comes down to how much do you value your time. You're going to make less. For example, Myrtle Beach, they take 40% off of the top,
Yep.
but you don't have to do anything, and your return's still pretty good.
Right.
If you do everything they were to do, you got a ton of more work, especially in a place that turns over weekly, if not more.
Right.
And yeah, you'll make more money, but a lot more work.
Right, but is it even possible? If you were going to take the Myrtle Beach unit, as much as it flips over, could you have possibly done that yourself, being in New Jersey?
It would be a little harder. So the Poconos turns over in a similar fashion to that one, weekly, 3 days, 5 days, whatever. But Myrtle Beach is consistently booked, right? So it's constant. So it would be a lot more work. And I think she could have done it because she did most of all the booking work, but I don't think we could have scaled, right? 2 properties, 3 properties, 4 properties, if they were like that. I think it would have kept the scale down because it's too much work. So.
Right.
So you have to factor in all that stuff, right? Is your job flexible? Can you take calls in the middle of the day? Are you going to take calls in the middle of the night, right? The Myrtle Beach example, we just got an email yesterday that said, "Hey, the air conditioner broke. It's going to be $4,250 to fix it. Just let me know if you want to put it on this credit card or put it on your bill or charge you every month for the next 12 months." I didn't have to do any homework, go looking how much is it going to cost. I got to hire somebody, blah, blah. I don't do
No
anything.
permits, no nothing.
But I also don't get to pick the price. It's going to be
That also sounds very
$4,250.
Yeah.
So,
It's a large unit.
so you are.
Myrtle Beach is hot.
Yeah, and it's hot, but it is a trade-off, right?
Right.
So it is really hard to answer the questions that you're asking. I think Adam's summary was good, right? You've got to be willing to commit the time, and the more time you commit, the more return you're going to get. But you can only scale so much, right? You're just going to run out of life, right? Run out of hours of the day.
And I think the bigger picture on that too, aside from the finances and the percentage, is what you had said on time. Because by allowing that one property to be truly passive, it now allows you more time to manage other properties, and then more time to enjoy the choice of stopping your employment at your previous employer.
Yeah,
Right.
and look, don't forget that time trade-off is also, you might have hobbies, you might have kids, you have other stuff to do in life too. It's not just your day job and this other job, right? There's other stuff to be done, and you could, but you may not want to commit all your time to it.
And speaking of time, you had mentioned something earlier that I definitely wanted to ask you about. You had mentioned that you're volunteering at a community group 2 times a week. So if you want to expand on that a little bit, tell us about what they do and, what do you do when you're there, the experience so far, and maybe, how do you feel about some of the people you met there so far?
Okay. Well, that's just my newest volunteer. I do volunteer at our local township. I'm the committee chair for our youth exchange program. I'm on the multicultural day committee. I help out at Chinese school. So I do a lot of local community volunteering. But this latest one since retirement is I do food pickups for the food pantries. So
That's great. And all this volunteering, what does that what does that pay? Sorry, I couldn't get it out of that one.
Zero. It pays zero. I know. And then you think, I gave my day job that paid me this, and now I'm working for zero. But the trade-off is I'm getting to do what I want to do, and the stress is zero. So
I think
That was one
think
of my
it
questions, is stress. 0? So let's back up to you.
Except
said-
when I'm playing pickleball.
I was going to say, I'm going to go back to pickleball.
Some stress is good.
Who are you finding to play pickleball in the middle of the day? Aren't they working?
You would think.
They're all
but
70 years old. They should kick their ass. That's why she likes doing it.
Unfortunately, they actually kick her ass.
There are
was
like
the reason.
30 people that play during the day in a township rec center. So
Are they
yeah, there's
working?
plenty.
And they're just taking off?
Some people are, this is my lunch break, 2-hour lunch, that kind of thing. But a lot of them are retired, so older, but
I like to shift to things more personal, away from the money. So along those lines, when we're in the middle of our career and we say, "Oh, who are you?" Well, I'm a doctor. I'm this. I'm that. We're so associated with our occupation. Who are you now?
who am I? I'm who I really want to be. Like, I always like to help people. And I probably should have been a nurse, but I didn't think of it when I was in school, and I probably couldn't afford it. But it's something that my mom's always been, and something that I've always picked up. And I like charity work and helping out community, in the community, and so I always wanted to work for a nonprofit instead of the company that I used to work for. Not that I so this is kind of helping me be who I really want to be.
So a lot of people go through an identity crisis when they retire because they've associated their individuality so much with their occupation. You seem to have completely avoided that and understood throughout your career as not necessarily who I am or who I want to be. And now that you've retired, you're able to do that. Is that fair assessment?
Yeah, that's
well done.
That's very accurate, Adam.
Well done.
I think being in IT might be a little different than I know you guys being engineers and stuff like that. Because to me, you guys as engineers is almost like a part of your being, right? Like it's the way you go through life. It's not just work. Your organization, your fact checking and mathematical and scientific thinking. Being in IT is not quite the same. Working with networks and making sure they're up and running and planning things like that. I can definitely easily disassociate myself from my work. It's not a part of my being.
But I
So-
think that has to do with your job because
Yeah,
I've been in
depends
IT,
on-
I've been in IT and it's not that easy. It's not going to.
I would agree with her because I was in IT for 10 years. And I thought when I left it, which was not done on purpose, that I would like, well, what did I go to school for? And I don't miss it. I don't miss trying to figure out what's wrong with the computer or whatever it is
Yeah.
every day.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's people staring like, how do you not know this? Like, because this is a new thing I got to figure out.
What about, so when you started out, you figured you're going to retire at 65, like everybody else. Somewhere along the line, you realize, hey, I could retire at 55. And then there's always the question, well, I can do it, but should I? Your answer to that was yes, because there's these other things you want to do. You're still young and you've got very good genes. So I'm wondering what's the long-term goal now, right? When from your 20s, 30s, 40s, it's always retirement. It's this carrot that's hanging out there. What are you looking for now, or is it just
Long-term?
day to day?
So I'd like to, being that we're still young and youngish and able, as long as we're physically capable, we want to be able to do the stuff that we like to do, hiking, backpacking, traveling, seeing the world on a tour bus is just not something we want to do. That's not us. That's not what we want to do. And
Amen, sister.
and so, we do that while we can, and then who knows, maybe I'll write my book when I'm 65. But
75.
but
This is the children's book?
children's book, and I'm also doing a book on my mom. So
I want to know the theme of both books, not the plot. Theme. Remember that from like 7th grade English? Difference,
I
right?
don't know the difference.
Okay. The theme is like the overall meaning,
Purpose,
the moral of it. The plot,
plot
is
is
the actual
specific,
events
right.
that happen,
Right.
right?
So the theme was an idea that actually Ray gave me, or we talked about it, and it's about a moon shadow versus a sun shadow, or
Does Cat Stevens have anything to do with this?
Who's that?
Being
I don't know.
followed.
Did he write a song about moon shadow?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't think so.
I don't
right?
know. Yeah, I don't
That's not where.
Yeah.
At least that's not where Ray's idea came from. Probably we were out one night looking at stars, and he's talking about moon shadows and how cool they are. And obviously, on some of our trips, we've started taking pictures of those kind of things. So that kind of sparked an idea of a moon shadow themed book for a young child looking for his moon shadow to make a moon shadow wish.
I didn't know you can make wishes on moon shadows.
Well,
I've been wasting all
after
this
you
time.
read my book, you will know
All right.
that you can.
So,
All right. So
the boy-
one.
the kid is searching
Yes.
and got it.
So what could is there anything that you could have done differently in retrospect that would have accelerated your retirement? Any mistakes you made?
Yeah, sold all our stuff before the .com bubble. Bought Amazon when it was $9. Lots. But
No, that's
You know,
important information.
yeah,
you know?
I mean, it's that kind of stuff, hindsight's 2020, right? Especially with stocks and stuff like that, you just can't predict, because nobody can predict.
So it's a big
even though they try.
it's a big promotion for real estate.
Yeah, and I would say
Well, hold on. There's booms and busts in real estate
Yeah.
as well.
Yes.
there are. But so the general answer, I think, to your question, because you can't predict all these things,
Right.
is start earlier,
Yes.
right? I think you can always say that, right?
And save as much as you can, right? The more you save, the more options you have.
So you had mentioned that you were previously working in the tech industry, and then you kind of joke around, "Oh, maybe I should have been a nurse," but not right now at this point in your life. But to give the viewers and listeners an idea of some of the things that you did do to kind of help you in this situation, I believe you recently had accomplished obtaining a license outside the tech industry that maybe helps you with the property management.
Yes. So
Want to share about that a little bit?
So, for those who may be still working a full-time job and want to realize some of their dreams, you don't have to necessarily quit your job, but you can do things on the side, take classes. I took a real estate class to help with our real estate investments and, making sure, everything we're doing is legit, and realize that, all right, I can go take the state exam and get my real estate agent license.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. Well, I did that, a couple of years ago, kind of in anticipation of retirement and maybe, another job that I could do that's not full
Constraint.
time,
Right.
40,
Yeah.
40 hours a week kind of thing.
Was that difficult, that test?
No.
Okay. No, just
Was
wondering.
was it not difficult in general or not for you?
I mean, I think it was more difficult than I expected, but I mean, for me, I guess it wasn't that difficult. I think a lot of the problems that people have with the real estate exam is, the math.
I think that's a great point that you brought up. I know, again, we're throwing around the term passive, right, for passive income. But when we listen to the story that you're sharing, we listen about, Adam's spreadsheet, we listen about Johnny talking about turning wrenches and being handy with tools. So for listeners out there that may think, wow, that's great, I'm just going to do that and put my money in things and just sit around and watch Price is Right and not learn anything, not read anything, not do anything, not know about anything, might be a bit of a false impression. Because it sounds like what you were doing is a lot of things to prepare on the understanding of the industry.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like what you guys were doing was preparing a lot of things mathematically, going through spreadsheets, planning things out.
Absolutely.
And to Johnny's point, what he was saying is you guys have some skills to be able to fix things when you need to and understand the judgment of when it might be better financially to pay people.
Yeah.
So I think understanding that and having that work put in, having the viewers and listeners understand that what we're calling passive is prep work and then continued of learning. Right? You're always keeping your eyes peeled on better deals, always looking for market changes and understanding where there could be better deals, interest rates, and keeping your pulse on that. And I'm sure the real estate license now may help you along that field, kind of switching industries, unlike someone who might be listening and think, passive, I'm sitting around reading nothing, doing nothing, thinking nothing,
Right.
which might be a false assumption on their end.
You're right. You're right.
I would agree.
Right.
And I think we're probably using the word passive to really mean it's not your day job. Right. And then some various levels of how much work you're going to put in outside of your day job.
Right. It's not a committed 40 hours a week or more, right?
So to his point and to everyone, what would you recommend to someone to read, something that gave you insight on how to accomplish what you did? Reading material, maybe Ray could say, Adam could say, what's something that someone could pick up real quick, start to read and give them a lot of insight? Maybe something, because I can't participate.
I would say play the game Cash Flow.
I would say The Richest Man in Babylon.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I've got another. And
We'll give the other one a go.
I don't even know what you guys are
Have
talking
it.
Go
about.
ahead.
First of all, what's cash game or whatever you call
Cash
it?
Flow.
Yeah, what is that?
It's a
game.
board game.
It's a board
Good
game.
game.
All right.
We'll play that next time you come over.
We'll play it in here. We'll play it with the group.
Oh, yeah, that would be funny.
I'm sorry. What am I supposed to be saying now?
A
Book.
A book.
Any
or
reading.
Some type of
Some
media
kind- yeah.
that influenced you, that helped you.
I've read a lot of just general books on succeeding in anything, in podcasts. Nothing specific that I can mention.
Any other-
Specifically for finance, me personally, I love the Dummy series because I like the things broken down very simple for me. And so I love the Dummy series. So a lot of the things that I mentioned before, I read a personal finance book. It was Personal Finance for Dummies. I love that book. I read it multiple times. I have another one. It's the Personal Investing for Dummies. I thought that was great. In terms of specific things for finance, that's kind of where I had my basis. And then talking to other people. I think
And
there's
now
other
for
books.
$19.95 only, you can get the financial how-to book from the Attic Static podcast.
I think for
They're
life in
flying
general,
off the shelves.
there's other books that I like and enjoy, and I kind of got more of, which also apply to finances, but specifically for finances, I thought those two were helpful for me.
But I mean, the world's at your fingertips, right? With the internet. I mean, go out and there's just so much information out there, and you can find, information on anything that you're interested in, or
But sometimes that's the hard part. There's too much, right? So you don't know where to start, right? So the things that we just mentioned, I think, are all good places to start.
Yeah, I think so. And I think also for me, which unless it has pictures and illustrations and I'm trying to figure something out, I'm not going to read it. But the only thing that I could give is what I've done is you surround yourself with the people who are accomplishing what you want.
Yeah.
And eventually it will rub off.
Mm.
Right. And then you start to participate and it goes back and forth. But
There was
It's
a study I
important
read.
the people that you're associating with.
There was a study I read the other day. I'm not good at remembering the exact facts of things, just the generalizations. But basically, if you surround yourself with better people of whatever you're doing, smarter, more money, athletically, it helps raise you. And if you surround yourself with people the other way, it'll bring you down.
Hmm.
So
That's what I tell our kids.
So you don't hang out with your kids anymore, right? Because they bring you down.
That's why poor Noah is getting dunked on by Cliff. The rec centers.
One of the things that Gary and Johnny had just mentioned about people, right, and interacting with people and hanging out with certain people, we've been talking a lot about, the last episode and this episode about finances and retirement. And I think one of the things that we haven't mentioned, but is also about investment, is investment in our interpersonal relationships. And listening to what you're saying and sharing about traveling, I assume you're not necessarily doing that alone. Volunteering at a community group, I assume you're not doing that alone. In contact with someone in Myrtle Beach who's helping to manage the property, I imagine it's not you over there on the other side, it's somebody else. So I think along the way, looking towards retirement, along that way, it's not just us. And we talked before about financial stability in a previous episode about not being just about us.
Mm-hmm.
And with your volunteering and understanding that throughout life, if you end up to the point, man, I'm retiring at 40 and I get this huge mound of cash, and you're sitting up there by yourself, that's not really very fun, right? I would be walking by and you just be sitting up there at the top of cash.
Yeah.
And I would imagine investing in personal relationships, family, friends, coworkers, other people in the community might be important.
Absolutely.
How would you say that has value? What kind of value that has to you? And do you feel that that's something that you do value now that you're in retirement?
Absolutely. I mean, not only dealing with people that help manage our properties, you're dealing with people that are renting your properties, right? Communicating with them. So there's communications, connections that you make. You meet people in, all walks of life and fields, and you never know, like, when one of these people that you meet or interact with, can help you down the road. I can't think of
Brad.
an example now, but
Brad Haberlin.
Brad?
Oh, that's the
No,
Okay.
different one. So here's the
More than
example.
one?
So one of our neighbors at one of the rentals houses who was going to rent his house asked us to help him out one time when he wasn't around because his friends were coming up to stay there and they needed something. So the friend turned out to
yes.
be a guy named Brad who turned out to be a mortgage broker.
that's who I meant.
Oh, did I introduce you to him?
I got a couple mortgages from him. Yeah.
So Gary got a couple mortgages from him. We refinanced 3 houses through him, and all because we had a relationship with our neighbor, and our neighbor had a relationship with this guy, and it all came all the way through. Right. So,
Right. And there's plenty of stories like that. I can't think of right now, but
yeah, it happens all the time.
yeah.
So it's a good thing to be close to people and keep connections. Another example I'll give you is everyone who says, "Oh, you're retiring. Are you guys moving to North Carolina?" Right?
Yeah.
Like that's the first
Yeah,
question,
yeah.
right?
Why North Carolina?
Florida.
South.
South,
Basically,
right?
what they mean is south.
And to us, the answer is, but then all of our friends and family would be 8 hours away.
That's the same thing I've heard from people all the time. You're going to get it in New Jersey. It's too expensive. I'm like, I'm not saving up all this money so I can go start all over.
Yeah, I'm going to go, right? So, and maybe some people do that,
But
right?
there-
But we have so many connections and friends and family and everything here. It would be very strange to
But
just
there
pick
is
up and leave.
there is a conversation to be had on making sure you put the numbers in on retiring in New Jersey compared
Absolutely.
to somewhere else. It's
Exactly.
Absolutely.
extremely expensive.
Absolutely.
Let's put that out.
But it doesn't change.
Huh?
It's not going to change.
Well, you do the math. You put in
What do
the
you mean?
Jersey expenses versus
No, I mean, you know
Florida.
what your expenses are now. It's not like you retire, you're going to have more expenses. Your taxes and everything are going to be the same.
No, but it's a long-term story, right? If we said, hey, we're going to retire in Portugal, we could have done it 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? So your
Right.
plan about
There's-
where you're going to be is very
Huge.
important.
In my opinion, it's probably one of the most important things.
Mm-hmm.
Then, because one of the conversations that we will be having here in detail is there's places on Earth that you save 20, 30, 40% of your money. As long as you knew it and said no, that's a different story. Most people don't even know it exists.
Right.
Yes.
Because they've concluded that. One of the people who concluded, like my mother. My mother's like, I lose nothing in Florida. I lose nothing in North Carolina. There's nothing that I want there. She's just, but if she was younger and someone was biting her ear and saying, Mom, if you went to Puerto Rico and you did certain things and you did this with this house and you did this plan, she probably would be like, well, maybe I could do that. Right?
Right.
But it's just like, this is what I want. I'm going to do it. But it's because she doesn't even realize how much more she's spending.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So would you conclude the same thing if I said to you, hey, by the way, here's 30% of your money back.
Right. You could
No.
start earlier.
So for me, no, because for perfect example, I wouldn't be sitting here right now
Right.
Correct.
Why not?
Yeah.
because I wouldn't
With
be
the
hanging out with you
30%,
guys
you
anymore.
just fly back in. You could have been in Delaware. You could have. What all I'm saying is that I'm not being a pain. All I'm saying is that most of the people that I talk to do not even know it exists.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
They feel like it's an obligation, or like what he just finished saying. Oh man, I gotta go sell my house and go live in Florida. Who the hell wants to go live in Florida, right? But as long as you have a number associated with that,
Yeah.
you know what I mean. And I think a lot of people don't know what that number.
But it's not just a number. It's a number and a plan,
Right.
right? Because it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it's huge.
And I think we can't underestimate the power of connections. And it's not simply that, hey, the more connections you have, the better off you'll be and those people will be. It goes beyond that, where to the point where I think it can be dangerous not to have connections. Ed, maybe you know the African proverb. You're always quoting stuff, so I got one back for you. It's not, it takes a village to raise a kid.
Although that's a good one.
That's a good one,
That's a good one.
but the one I'm thinking about is the village that does, or a child that is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth.
Yeah, very true. Very
Right.
true.
That was kicking around on the internet this week.
Yeah. And I think some of the things that Johnny had.
That's deep.
Yeah, no, it's very true. Because I think some of the things that Johnny had
That's dangerous.
shared about, the money aspect, considering, well, the return on the value and the cost of living, those financials are important. But then what Ray was saying, well, if we move, we're moving away from family. And what Adam was saying is true too, with the effects of other people. So when we move away, say I move away and like, man, it's going to be cost of living for me, it's going to be a lot cheaper. What about the emotional and mental aspect on me? Will I then be lonely? And then more important, what about the emotional and mental health aspects on those loved ones I leave behind? Right? Does that burn the bridges of all those interpersonal relationships, the years and decades I've spent building with my family and my friends? And what happens to our relationships through there? Yeah, with technology, we can build those and try to reconnect, but it's difficult. And like that child in the village, right? And of all of investments, no one would ever sink a whole lot of money into a business or a property and just walk away from it. So with our interpersonal relationships with human beings, aside from those that may generate, financial advantages, just, other loving relationships, interpersonal relationships, how do we just walk away from that? We can't necessarily quantify that with a dollar value, but at the same time, there's those emotional tolls like that.
Yeah,
that proverb
and
you
look, this
shared.
whole thing about retiring to someplace warm, I think that's a relatively new invention. Maybe 2 to 3 generations old.
That's actually great.
That's not the
That's
way
right.
When air
That's right.
conditioning came about.
Perhaps, yeah.
I actually, I'm glad you said that. That kind of leads me into, it's not a quote, but I actually looked up on it's not a quote. Not a quote.
Pointing.
It's not a
All right.
quote, but it's from Wikipedia. I happened to look up the history of retirement, and I'm like, I don't think this is that old. I think this is like a new thing that we just kind of made up. And according to Wikipedia, the practice of leaving one's job or ceasing work after reaching a certain age has been around since the 18th century, which isn't that long ago when you consider human history of thousands of years. And we're just talking about a couple hundred years. And then if you want to go further into retirement as a government policy, began to be adopted by countries around the late 19th century, according to Wikipedia,
Okay.
They had to,
right? So it's really
Social Security.
relatively new, just maybe a few generations old, right? Whereas before that, for thousands and thousands, right, of recorded human history years, it wasn't like that,
Yeah.
right? And maybe, right, it's those interpersonal relationships that maybe drove things in a different direction.
Well, here we go again with the failed experiment of the nuclear family. Historically, that was not the norm. It was the norm to live with an extended family,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't move away because you're 60 years old and have enough money and are able to.
Right.
That's new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 3
Absolutely.
generations in one household.
Right, but it's like any other formula, right? As long as you know what you could possibly do, then you could either choose it or not,
Right.
right? You have to have options.
Right. Right. You have to know.
You have to
You
know.
have to- Yep.
So even beyond that, or before that, you've got to be able to think for yourself and not just go to college because that's what everybody else does, and not just retire to North Carolina or Florida because that's what everybody else does.
Exactly.
That's
And
bullshit.
not just retired at 65, 67 because that's what everybody else does.
Right.
See,
Retire young and move north.
I could give you an example.
I say.
And it's one of those things where it doesn't answer any of these questions. It just gives you insight. So my aunt did that. So my aunt worked for the state her whole life. Back in the day, she didn't pay for medical or her pension. Did not come as a percentage out of her checks. Different time, right? They changed all
Yeah,
that
yeah.
in the 2000s. Real easy. And she also had deferred comp on top of it. She retired. But it was funny. It's like she immediately concluded, I cannot retire in New Jersey. She could have.
Right.
Make more money retired. She didn't have any other real estate property. She didn't have any other plans except very traditional retirement, right? Her pension, which is priceless, full medical for her and her husband, left to Florida, sold her house, needed that money to sell that house, bought a house over there, retired. That was in 2005, right when we got married. I go visit her quite often. Nancy is probably from what you remember her, she's night and day by moving to Florida. She just became like a completely different person.
Better or worse? How so?
Better, but just different. She acclimated, she changed her ways. It just became a completely different person. So it's like, I believe that initially looking at it, you'd be like, wow, not a very good financial plan, and you have to sell your house in order to get there. But it's important for people to know that it does work. She moved, no financial responsibility because the house that she had for a long time had appreciated. It was a single family home. It was not, it was a liability, right? But she sold it. She made a big profit because she had been in it for 20-something years. Don't quote me on that, but for a long time, Keene Street, right? But what happens? I look at that plan, I'm like, I don't want to have to sell anything, right? I want to be able to, but it's a plan that does work. She was from the north, but if you talk to my aunt now, she may as well have been raised in Florida. She thinks differently. She acts differently. Politically, she's differently, or acts, thinks differently. Yeah. So it's one of those things where it exists.
Right.
The formula exists, but does it fit for everyone?
Right.
No, and no one's going to know what it is, right? You didn't know
And
what your
it's-
plan was at 25,
Right. It's
right?
different for everybody too, right? I mean, but it does change you, right? It definitely does change you when you. At least for me, I feel like it's a good change. At least
It's only been 2
internally.
months. What do you expect to feel differently like a year from now?
I don't know. I mean, I don't expect to feel much more different than now.
Any regrets whatsoever?
None at all. I mean, I was terrified. I talked about this for at least a year or two before I actually pulled the trigger. And when I was ready to pull the trigger and submit my resignation, it was frightening, terrifying. Am I doing the right thing?
Where do you think that fear came from? Because you had done the numbers, it works.
Because why was it so scary? I guess because I've always worked.
Plus, you
It was
did
just
that job for how many
It was
years?
a way of life
Yeah.
that I've always had for 45 years, and I'd never
labor.
not worked.
How
But
how
that's
long were you
okay.
at that
All right,
company for, though?
14,
Now-
40 years.
Not to keep going back to, but this is important, and give it to you guys as a homework for next week. We could sort of answer it. If you both retired and you did move to Florida, what would you save by not having to pay state tax? You should be able to bring that to the people as one of the benefits of leaving a state that's so taxed, going to a state that is less taxed. That number, I know a certain gentleman who did it, large scale, a lot of money. First savings of his first year, he bought a 50-foot boat. Just on
Wait,
taxes.
But it's all a
you're-
percentage.
You're
It's all
saying
percentage.
property
Yeah.
taxes.
Right.
So he's paying, 20,000.
There's no state
Income tax.
There's no state income tax in Florida, right? So by you
Okay,
by you
income
relocating over there, there's to a certain extent there's a percentage.
But it's a
that you
different
get.
discussion because he still had income. If you're talking about retiring and moving, you don't have income anymore, then it's not going to have
Right.
the impact that you're talking
But
about.
I think it's
right?
important to know, right? Because that's one of the biggest things that people say, no, I'm going to Arizona, I'm going to Florida for this reason, right?
Right.
And
So-
that comes back to the spreadsheet.
it all
There's
comes
no
back.
way around it unless
it's-
you want to
it's
roll
a-
the
It's
dice.
math.
Good
right?
thing
You've
to know,
gotta
though,
do the math.
right?
It's
So
math.
if you two at a certain percentage say, all right, if we were to move to Florida and not stay in New Jersey, we would save X.
I think it's I would actually prefer a different question. The question might be, if you had moved to Florida prior to retiring, would you have saved more of your income?
To
And
retire
then,
earlier.
and therefore you could have even done it earlier. right?
Right.
Because
That's-
once you've
that's a play on
retired,
it,
it's
yeah.
not as
Right,
it's
'cause
not
your
as lucrative,
income's
right? Because your
changed.
income is so much lower that it's not going to have an impact like that,
Right.
right? So I think again, it's part of the
But
plan.
it isn't. It's an important. The answer is important because I talk to a lot of people, and that's the first thing out of their mouth. The reason why they're relocating, just less taxes and maybe it's just one of those things where
I think it's that. I think people haven't done the math and they just hear it and people say it and they do it, and I don't think it has as much of an impact as you think it does.
okay.
And there's also something, there is some you get what you pay for factor. I'm not saying every single dollar is completely justified, but in places where there's extremely low taxes, there's also extremely low services. Your house is on fire, nobody's coming. Police, state police might be here tomorrow, right? So that plays into it a little bit as well.
Sure. Because what are our taxes going for, right? Obviously, is services.
One other point that I just wanted to kind of bring up, just to kind of draw in, some other viewers that might be listening, is this is awesome, your plan that you had and then it's worked out for you. And there might be other viewers that have different goals. And I think everyone's individual goals and circumstances may be different. And I think irrespective of the circumstances that they have, there's always a way to have that particular circumstance be better and to meet one's goals down the road. And although I think this is a great plan for you guys and it's worked out for you guys, I don't think in any way, that needs to necessarily alienate any of the listeners that are out there thinking, well, this podcast isn't for me, because it certainly still can be.
Right.
Absolutely. For example, could you have afforded a Lexus when you were 35?
Absolutely.
Did you purchase one?
No.
Could you have afforded $1 million, $1.5, $2 million McMansion when you were
Wow.
35,
I don't know about
40?
that.
Right. But some
Maybe.
but some people may choose
You
to.
absolutely could. I'm not saying
Yes.
necessarily pay in cash.
Right.
Absolutely.
No, you
But
never pay cash.
You
right?
didn't. So yeah, there are some sacrifices, but
Sure.
is that really a sacrifice?
Right.
Because your car gets you where you're
For
going.
some
and there's nothing
people,
wrong with
it seems like
and your
it is,
house is
right? So it's up to the person, right?
Right.
Like some people, not buying the Gucci bag is a sacrifice, but so it is up to individual person. But to be honest, the more you save, like I said, the more options you have. Just because you have no money, you don't have to spend it, or you could spend it if that's what you really want. I mean, we had different priorities. Instead of driving a new car, we went on vacation. So we spent our money on time together and vacations with the family and things like that. So it's not like, but like I said, if you save, then you have the options. If you don't, then you have very little to go on.
Right. But some people may have different values. Some of the things that we mentioned that, I'm not saying necessarily, I would value those, but there's some things that other people may value. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And if those people choose that, it's perfectly fine. It's okay.
Right.
It may not necessarily lead to an early retirement, but if they choose that, that's their choice.
I'll be the
Absolutely.
first. I'll be the first. To be very honest. I mean, I how would you say? I don't struggle, but I think about it because it's like you have certain wants, and people want certain wants, right? I don't think it's wrong that people want a good car, want
Sure.
a big house. I think it's wrong to have that and not being able to have it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a different story.
Yes.
Living beyond your means or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
But I think sometimes how would you say, we focus on not doing that, and that's the path to save the money and get the funds to then do the real estate. But I know plenty of people who have both.
Right.
Right? They have the car they want, they have the house they want, and they have the other one, right? Because they're just
But are they
have-
retiring early? So,
they could.
but like Ed said, maybe you don't want to retire.
Right, but
early.
they could, right? But I think
Right.
it's important for the listeners to understand that the things that you hold in your heart and that you want, you might just have to fit that into the formula in the spreadsheet. Right? It's not to ignore it. It's not to feel guilty about
Right.
it, because and not that I struggle with it, but I watch it all the time. And one example that I've always loved to give to people, my father has never even touched a spreadsheet. He's never read a spreadsheet. He don't give a crap about a spreadsheet. He don't care who's the president. He don't care who's the mayor. He doesn't care about anything. If he wants this microphone, he simply asks how much it costs, and he knows in his mind how much he has to work to go get it. It's very simple. It's a very simple life, and he could have retired earlier. He could have retired later. It's just a different mentality. But he never burdened himself on I'm not going to get what I want.
Right. But he still
Completely
did-
different point of view.
But he
I
still
think
did the math, right?
He
still
also
did the
never
math.
burdened himself with a desire to keep up with the Joneses.
No, but I mean, the what I'm trying to say is like one day he came with the bright idea he wanted a Mercedes. And it's like, Pop, you're about to retire. Why would you want a Mercedes? Because I want a Mercedes. Well, you're probably going to have to work a little more. Fine, that's fine.
Right.
Because
Didn't care.
Right.
Right.
He did not care,
Exactly.
and to this day he doesn't. Like if,
Right.
if I say, Pop, your camera's all beat up. Yeah, which one's the best camera? That's. But Pop, don't worry about you're not going to use all these other functions. No, I want that one. How much is it? That's $3,000. Okay, go get it. Right? It just doesn't care. Right? And it exists. He lived the perfect life in my mind. Right? And right now he just sits there and he's happy as can be. But I think it's important to put those things out there that you don't have to kill all the stuff that you had in your head.
Absolutely.
As long as you're willing to sacrifice to go get it.
But I think there's this twist there. So
Right.
your dad didn't do those things to that extreme when you guys were still kids and he was still providing for the family and you guys were all younger, right? He wasn't buying the best camera and a Mercedes when he was 35, right? Even though maybe he could have.
The ironic thing, when we were young, my father had this, and he really did. There was Fishkins in town that most people didn't even know existed, a very high-end camera thing. That's where my dad went to get his camera. He had the Pentax. He had the Canon. You can ask these kids.
Right.
All of my dad's stuff was top of the line. When he was dating my mother, he went to King's, a boutique store. He didn't go to the regular stores. My mom had the most expensive outfits. And Becky had the matching. It really was, and he was like the only one in town like doing
Right.
that.
But he picked his battles, right? He didn't also have the
Priorities.
McMansion
No.
and the fancy
Right,
cars. He
exactly.
Right.
picked the ones he wanted. Way said, we pick travel
Right,
instead of this.
exactly.
He picked those things instead of that,
Right.
right? You
It's
can't have
important to know,
everything. You
right.
probably can't have everything.
Right.
So, what do you guys think of the take-home points there that we got from Way from our interview today here on the podcast?
I think that, not to put words in your mouth, Way, well, I think you get the final say here, but what I'm most impressed by is that you've completely avoided the personal crisis of who am I now? What am I going to do? Because you already had in your head who you were and what you wanted to do. And the purpose of leaving your job was to enable you to be able to do those things. So fist bump.
I think Way should conclude it.
Yeah, I'm saying maybe we all throw in our 2 cents and then Way bats cleanup.
I think from what I've seen so far, not being bored is a great achievement, right? And keeping that up is going to be really great.
One of the questions I had for you, which didn't come through before, is how long were you at your last job? A long time, right?
32 years.
So do you think that's a big reason why you had a problem retiring? Because it's a big part of your life.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to, leave the team in a lurch. We were actually kind of short-staffed at the time.
So you still cared even
So
though you
I
weren't going
did,
to be
yeah.
there.
I mean, I didn't just want to pick up and leave and say, "Hey, not my problem anymore." I mean, I cared about my friends and coworkers, and I want to make sure, we all, they all continue to succeed, and which I had no doubt that they would, but try to make that as easy as possible. Ease my own guilt.
Well, I told it to you the last time. There's still an obligation. You need to create a blog about your day-to-day and the insight that you get every day. It has to be something,
But not a podcast. We don't want the competition.
No.
Okay.
No. It's an annex to our podcast, but it's very important. I think one of the biggest things is examples, and I believe aside from listening to this, right, it's going to give people insight, but there has to be a progressive documentation of this is what I thought, this is what really happened, this is what I anticipated, this is what really happened. I didn't think I was going to have problems with Ray, but he's getting on my nerves.
That'll never happen.
we'll
the other
see.
way around.
We'll
maybe.
see. Starting Monday.
So it's like the reality of this reality that you were able to accomplish. You have to have it. You have to document it, right? Because we get this little insight and we ask a lot of questions, but ours, we're already on a trajectory. We might modify it a little bit because you say something, but these kids, they're 20, 21, 22. They want something to like, all right, this is what I thought and this is what she thought. What's the reality? So please make the effort to do that.
One of the things I really enjoyed hearing about is how now in retirement, you have more time to further your volunteer work. And I think that's great. In a previous episode, we talked about financial stability, not just being about us. And I think, you're a good example of that. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And although we joked about how much does it pay, it doesn't pay anything financially with dollars. I would love to hear in a future episode how it's paying huge dividends in other ways for you and the community. So thank you for sharing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so I guess to wrap up, some takeaways, obviously, save where you can. The ultimate goal is to be happy. I say be a productive member of society. That's always something that I think is undervalued, I think, and try to instill that in our kids. But I don't know. I hope it's come through. But yes, so save where you can. Obviously, not eating cereal every day or something. Enjoy a good meal. Maybe not eat out all the time, but everything in moderation, right? Be happy, productive member of society. What else was I going to say? You guys are asking me about how I did this, and I didn't do it alone, right? Like you said, it takes a village, right? Of course, my husband Ray, Adam's spreadsheet, Johnny's support.
That's what I'm going to be known for. I think that's going to be on my gravestone. Here lies Adam and his spreadsheet.
And there's just going to be a grid on the tombstone.
Excel is an awesome tool. Excel is the tool.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
So yeah, I mean, I didn't do this by myself. I didn't, get here by myself. Obviously, I worked, I saved, managed our finances and managed our properties, did a lot of work. And, but, there's just, you can't do it alone. So don't be ashamed to reach out, ask questions if you don't know something, and, get all the information and support you can to get where you want to be.
I have to say something. I feel extremely proud that I have been part of your journey. It was subliminal, little by little over time.
And we might end up in Puerto Rico together.
Ray's out of the picture? No.
Yeah.
I guess I'm stuck in the attic with Jen.
Not that. Not that.
Not that
Fun
way.
things you can do when you retire.
Yeah.
But it is a huge accomplishment. I have to keep saying it, and every time we talk about it, I will congratulate you. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Same here.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Well done.
Great
Same
job.
here.
Who's next?
Attic Static. Done.
Thank you for listening to the Attic Static podcast. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe, and feel free to leave a comment below. Or come check us out at our website at atticstaticpod.com. And stay tuned for new episodes out every Monday.